Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Development Discourse, where we ideate for Africa's development. My name is Patrick Okigbo. I'm the founding partner at Next Year. Next Year is a multi-competency advisory firm focused on addressing Africa's complex development challenges. Today, we're going to confront one of Africa's most enduring paradoxes. A continent blessed with vast arable land, abundant sunlight, energetic youth, and some of the world's richest food cultures. Yet, we're still home to persistent hunger, soaring food prices, and fragile supply chains. Nigeria alone has over 34 million hectares of land, arable land, which positions it as the seventh in the world, seventh or eighth. Yet millions of households struggle to access affordable, nutritious food. Post-harvest losses swallow up about 40% of what farmers produce. And the break in our value chain, between these smallholder farmers and the big processors or markets continue to undermine productivity and investments. However, across Africa, a new generation of high-impact entrepreneurs is filling these gaps, building processing capacity, strengthening logistics, deploying innovative financing models, and demonstrating that food systems transformation is not only possible, but also investable. Few of these people embody this wave better than my guest today. Osakwe is an economist, entrepreneur, investor, and the visionary behind Agrolay Ventures, where she's the managing partner, and Nuli Foods. And we're going to talk a lot about Nuli Foods. I'm really excited about what she's doing with it. For more than 2 decades, she's been at the forefront of reshaping Africa's agribusiness, supporting bold founders, building farmer-linked supply chains, and recently expanding Nuli Foods, her farm-to-table restaurant brand into the United States. At the point she was a special advisor to Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture. She has an MBA from Kellogg and MSc from Warwick. Today, we'll explore a simple but very powerful question. How can high-impact entrepreneurship transform Africa's food value chain and unlock the continent's full agri-food potential? Ada, it's a pleasure to have you on Development Discourse.
Thank you, Patrick. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thanks for that introduction. I always tell people that when I hear I'm an economist, I'm like, oh, that's true. I studied economics in school. But I just think it's still one of those, although I'm not a practitioner, but, it's just one of those foundational classes and just to get you really in touch with life, right? With economies, people, with labor, with everything else, right? So
and it's going to shape many of the conversations we're going to have today, right? So if we start with, say, the state of agribusiness in Africa, many African countries, especially Nigeria, have abundant arable land. Yet we face this very significant hunger. About 30% of Nigerians can't even afford the type of food they want to eat or in the quantities they want it. What explains this persistent abundance and all the factors of production being in place, yet we have this scarcity in Africa's agriculture?
Yes. No, it's just that conundrum. It's that conundrum that has puzzled me for the last nearly 20 years that I have been looking at this problem and working in Africa's food systems. As you rightly said, we are just blessed with arable land. Over 60% of the continent's arable land, that continues being the percentage I've heard for many years, and it's still being quoted. So it shows that not much is still happening in terms of how we use that land effectively, and we'll speak about those issues. We have people, we have young people, we have water. We are just blessed with soil that just you drop things and it just grows. Our climatic conditions are fantastic, right? And then we have the human beings to consume there is demand. So you grow it and they should be eating it, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
not just eating it, we should be able to have surplus to send to other countries and make money
Mhm.
from it. But it's not happening, or not happening at the scale, the pace that we require. Africa is still importing over $100 billion worth of food annually, right?
Mhm.
And that is making us incredibly dependent on geopolitical risk, on climate risk, on insecurity, on disease. We saw it when COVID happened and borders are shut. So it
Mhm.
continues to be an issue. At the same time, you think about even when we say we are the largest producer of certain things, yes,
Mhm.
largest producer of, for Nigeria, for example, let's say the largest producer of cassava, right?
Mhm.
Global, where over 20 million metric tons, we're the largest producer of some things like even pineapples in Africa. But to your point, this goes to waste. We are
Mhm.
not adding value. It is wasting. We have net up to 60% post-harvest losses. So this is not the waste or the sort of food waste when the people in the West will say that they bought food from the supermarket and they ate and they didn't finish the food. So it's overabundance, right? And you throw
Yeah.
it in the bin. This, our own waste is happening right at the farm gates because you
Mhm.
just did not get it out and evacuate it for whatever reasons, and we'll speak to that. So I just really wanted to paint that picture that it is we are living in an abundance, and yet we are having these issues. We're living in abundance, yet we have issues with food insecurity and hunger and malnutrition. And so it's really been my focus for the last 3 years to just figure out how can we use that abundance. How can we use, when people use the word potential, how can we
Mhm.
turn that into truly actionable things that are executed, right, to
Exactly.
make a difference. And that's sort of what I've dedicated at least my adult life or my entrepreneurial life to. And I know we're starting on the challenges, but again, let's just point it out of some of the whys, because I'm sure
Mhm.
people are asking, so why is that the case?
Mhm. Mhm.
Why is it in many cases? One is maybe underinvestment.
Okay.
Underinvestment in many cases. We have the Africa, the CADEP, Maputo Declaration, all of that has talked about the need to invest at least 10% of our national budgets in agriculture. But we're not even close. We're not even close, right? We're still at about 1%, if not less. So that one is a big issue. Secondly, is the fact that we are producing, but we are still importing so much. We talked about those numbers because we are not processing food. We are not adding value to it in the way that makes sense for us to finally consume these things. Take tomatoes, for example. During the season of harvest, you see tomatoes rotting on the streets of Kano, right? But you have limited processing facilities to take those tomatoes and turn it into ketchup, or turn
Mhm.
it into tomato paste, or turn it into whatever else that we can then consume, the final product. We don't have the cold chain or the storage to be able to evacuate, or the logistics to evacuate these things in large quantities to be able to then use or store for future use. And we don't have the infrastructure. So,
Mhm.
so that for me, in many ways, when I talk about underinvestment as a big pillar, there's the public underinvestment, and I gave those numbers, but it's underinvestment across the board. And there
Mhm.
are many reasons that create that situation, right?
And I want
By
to
the
get
time,
to Yeah,
yes.
I want to get to some of those reasons.
Mhm.
And so every time I talk to people, and in health, in education, in agriculture, there's always some convention that says government should spend X percentage of its budget on something. Um, I always say, okay, can we forget the government for a minute?
Yeah.
Because you and I know that we haven't spent it 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We're not about to spend it today. So
Yeah.
I want to get down to the brass tacks. Are
Mhm.
there market solutions to many of these challenges that we talk about? So if there's a missing middle, of the aggregators, the processors, the cold chains, etc. Why are private sector folks not jumping in there to take advantage? So if we're producing so much and wasting so much, but there are people here who are hungry and would pay, why are you and I, why are the private sector folks not jumping in? Why aren't you funding more people through Agrolay, to get in and solve that opportunity?
Patrick, maybe you were a fly in the wall during my board meeting last week at Agra, where we talked about those CADEP numbers, and I said the exact thing you said. I said, the health folks are actually also looking for 10% of budget. Education is looking for the same, but nobody is hitting it. There are scarce resources. And so indeed, one of the things that I did while I worked in government, my focus was to attract private sector investments. So we were like, the focus was government, okay, you can't meet that 10%, as you rightly said, Patrick, but focus on what you can do. What you can do, give us the right policies, put the right enabling environment in place that allows private sector and other actors to deploy capital and to do what needs to be done to turn that import bill around, right? And to bring the types of investments that are required. When I say there's underinvestments, private sector can take care of that, right? So to turn it around. And so for me, it is critical because at the end of the day, the policies still need to be right. Because private sector can come, they say we have the money, okay, we're coming, right? But at the end of the day, if somebody is putting millions of dollars into investing in a rice processing facility to grow domestic paddy rice, buy it from our farmers, and then mill it through their processing facility. Then a government wakes up one day and says, oh, we're allowing the importation of Indian rice. Then what does that person do? And that's a policy. So one of the biggest things is for us to think through the right policies to ensure that we are putting in place, we're creating the environment for private sector, and not just to do it as a one-off, to make sure that it's there to stay and it actually achieves what it sets out to do. One of the biggest risks we have is policy somersaults. 10 years ago or more, we came in with very active, bold policies on the government side with regards to agriculture. We started seeing change. In fact, I was looking at the numbers recently. I can take rice, for example. Rice was one of the big imports, part of the $10 billion annually we were spending on things like rice, wheat, fish, and other staples, including tomato paste. And we set a bold strategy around no more importation of that. Let's encourage local millers. Let's get our paddy production up. And then Nigeria now I saw the numbers recently that we've now overtaken folks like Egypt in domestic paddy production. So that continued. Investments actually came in. But then the flip side is, do we have enough milling potential? And can we truly meet the 10 million metric tons annually that is consumed by Nigerians for rice?
Why don't we have that potential? Why don't we have that capacity today? If you see the opportunity, private sector folks see the opportunity, the government has some policy, as ineffective as it may be. Why are investors in the agri business not putting more money in, not supporting more entrepreneurs to take advantage of this? I know the policy is not perfect, but isn't there room for, or are you seeing some entrepreneurs that are making it within the inefficiencies we see, and what are we learning from them that we can?
Absolutely. And the first example of rice I gave is absolutely, it's exactly that. The fact that we're now seeing a little bit more milling potential, more paddy growth because investors did come in and people are buying, right? Nigerians will still buy their rice. So they saw the investment case. They went in, policy was there to back it up, and it happened. There are people going in. I gave the examples of tomatoes. We have some interesting investments that have gone into tomatoes. For example, in the north, you have Tomato Jos, a young lady who decided to work with farmers in Jos and grow tomatoes. increase the yields. And that's another conversation around how we need to raise our yields in Africa to make the case for even processing, for it to make sense. The production, the soil, the inputs has to work. So this particular entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur, decided to focus on that first. Once she worked with the farmers and got those up, she then invested in a facility. She not only did it, but she got the state to support. She got venture capital investments to support, and they now have a tomato paste brand. So you see that happening, but things came into play. Government supported her. Land was provided. She did the investments and the inputs. Agriculture is complicated. A lot of things have to come together, right? She did the investments and the inputs. We have security challenges in Nigeria, Patrick, in the areas of production, in the rural areas. We continue to grapple with that. So people may come in, they may put, but then somebody is kidnapped. So people are afraid. So even if you start, sometimes you're like, how do I even continue this? And so you start finding that some of the investments stay near the cities, maybe Lagos and stuff, which really you shouldn't be farming in Lagos. Or I always laugh when I'll see processing facilities in Lagos, but the feedstock they need, they don't grow it in Lagos or even close to Lagos. It's grown up in the north or in the south, right? So that doesn't make sense. You really should try and concentrate your feedstock and your industrial capacity together.
Sure.
But there are challenges like that. And then the final challenge again is the infrastructure. Processing needs power. Patrick, we are still epileptic with our power supply. It's one of the highest costs of doing business, the contribution of power. So these are things that come together, the elements that come together. And I'm not even putting in the climate issues and the shocks, because agriculture still depends on, okay, let's pray that everything goes well with the soil, with rains and all of that. So things are happening. Innovations are happening across the board. And that will be the final point I'll say here. And then we can build on it.
Yeah.
Culture is a systems play. It's
Yeah.
food systems. So it's across the board and builds up. And we are finding investments, especially young people coming into various parts of that food system value chain. And we can speak about that in a bit.
So can I ask two questions? Number one is I like the tomato juice story. You know, we use the story a lot. L&Z in dairy.
L&Z.
We also talk about, so we like those stories. But why aren't they scaling? Why aren't we seeing a whole lot more tomato juices? Why aren't you funding more of those entrepreneurs? So I think if we can unlock that, that could help answer this question of the missing middle. And when I look at the missing, and that's my second question, when we look at the missing middle challenge, it is that the smallholder farmers need a lot of things. They need inputs, they need this, they need the other one. Have we seen any models in any countries or companies that have helped to address this missing middle problem? Maybe sometimes I think about what Olam tried to do in rice, right? Where they got in there and provided the seedlings and financing, etc. But then I hear it wasn't sustained. What was the challenge? So I'm just trying to figure out, how do we solve the scaling problem and how do we solve the missing middle problem?
Yeah. No, Patrick, I've already started addressing those questions, and those challenges are significant. Infrastructure is a big one, and financing is a big one. You still have a huge financing gap. Over $300 billion is needed, right? Sorry, 300 million. Yeah, $300 million is needed just for the agriculture sector. So, and it's a broader thing more than just agriculture, right? It's across the board for SMEs. And when we're talking about entrepreneurship, it's across the board. And these challenges, it's just deeper for agriculture because of all the things that have to come into play. So people go safer, right? Let's go and do fintech. Yeah, let's go and do retail tech or whatever. But agriculture, they stay away because I can't wait for whether I got inputs or not, or whether the farmer would grow, or whether the farmer would side sell me when I'd already gotten an agreement. It is complicated. So, and that's
Mm.
what was pushing us to start thinking about the value chain, right? And thinking
Mhm.
about the entire food systems that a transformation happens. Because that's the
Mhm.
way I've viewed it. I've not necessarily started at the farm, even as an investor myself or as an entrepreneur myself. I have
Mhm.
invested in early days, maybe over 12 years ago, I invested in Afyong's business. I was one of her first
Mhm.
investments that, and I'm
She's
sure
done very well.
that's
Mhm.
another example that you must hear.
Yeah,
And I
she's done
invested
very well.
the conversation when I had with her when I was investing was like, I need you to source locally. Look at Afi now sourcing from how many female farmers sourcing her pineapples for the dried fruits. She was
Mhm.
not. She was buying dried fruits from Ghana,
Mhm.
packaging it. I'm not sure you know this story. Packaging it into brands, into the pack. Sometimes I would even travel and help her bring some of the packaging materials. In packaging materials was even difficult to get in Nigeria. When I think
Mm.
back to how we started on this food systems transformation, right? When we were talking about it's not just about food, it's about building brands, right? And we'll talk about that when we talk Nuli.
Mhm.
Create the demand, make it make sense, right? So Afi started by building a brand, sourcing from others. And then when it started making sense, okay, I can see the market. I can see there's demand. Let me start investing.
Mm.
Let me think through how I raise funding. Now I'm going to try and get a small facility. Now I'm going to hire. Now I'm going to start locally doing this. Now I'm going to figure out who can give me pineapples in the quantities I require to meet this demand. And in the varieties I require. That's how agriculture gets so specific and complicated.
Yeah.
When I'm doing a juice, somebody can tell me, Ada, your spice root juice, which uses beetroot, it tastes different this week. Why? What happened?
Mm.
Can just be a soil issue and the beetroot that was grown, something happened and it's a different taste.
Mm.
Acidity, all of those things come into play. And suddenly, so how can you play in the $7 trillion global food and beverage market that is so focused on systems, on making sure your tomatoes are the exact tomatoes or potatoes remain the same variety all the time, if we can't even guarantee that,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So that
Mm.
is the scale you're speaking of. We need
Mm.
to get to that kind of scale if we want to move from being the less than 10% of that $7 trillion food and
Mhm.
beverage market, if we want to move away from being only less than 10% of that.
Mm.
We
Mm.
have
Mm.
to think big. And
Okay.
and and I give that example of an AFI because there is progress being made. There
Mhm.
is. 10 years ago, it wasn't that, but it was difficult, Patrick. Financing. AFI had to scrape, 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 sometimes a whole year. An investor would have said where she would have gone through every single bottleneck and questions and due diligence and yet and she'll believe that money is coming and they'll get to investment committee and they'll say no. Same thing has happened to me as an entrepreneur as well. So you're back to ground zero, all your budget, all your plans. So it takes a
Yeah.
certain type of entrepreneur to have the grit and the resilience. That's a word that I want to make sure I say here, to
Mm.
stay
Mm.
with it and stick with it. We all like the success stories. People want to be associated with Ada now that she has Nuli in DC, right? But when we were hustling, when I didn't know how I was going to meet payroll because the price of diesel just
Exactly.
shot up and people
Exactly.
were saying they couldn't come to work because of transportation costs. These are the realities. And it's
Mm.
not just agriculture or food businesses that are dealing with it. It is across the board, SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And I'll just finalize on something and I want to leave you with it. And it's made me really think. This whole problem has made me think. And I want to push you on this, Patrick. I wonder if you have a view that sometimes this our overemphasis on small.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Why don't we instead pick some of those winners? And I wrote about this in the Brookings paper that I did earlier this year. Was it last year? And I
Mm.
called them SME Eagles. Pick those who have gone through the fight. Pick the mirrors of the world, the AFIs of the world, whatever. They have seen it. Back them. Government should go everywhere they are going and talk about them to every single investor they meet.
Mm. Mm.
Our captains of industry should go and talk about them to every single person they meet in every meeting and say, that's our transformation. If we want to help Nigeria, put it in those 10 businesses, put it in those 20 businesses across all these sectors who have done it. And then when they do that, the model is that they intentionally have to give the playbook and support all the other modules, other young people. Don't go and reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. Some of these things are easy fixes. And then give them the support and the systems that require them to fly and to scale.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just holding myself back from giving a one-line answer to that because I think it's quite complicated. There are arguments for and against, picking winners, and do you have the system that enables you to do it efficiently and effectively? Some folks can say Nigeria picked the Dangote as a winner, right? And we've gained some. There could be some inefficiencies.
The men who built America, they picked the Rockefellers. You're going to do trade, you're going to do this. And look at where America is today, built on capitalism. We have to have these hard conversations and do it in an equitable way. We're all smart enough to design these systems to make sure at the end of the day, they end up being equitable.
I hope we are. I'm just holding myself back
That's
so that
another conversation.
so we don't enter a different topic. But if we took a food systems, view to the failures in the agro space, right? It could be a combination of things. It could be policy failures. It could be market failures. It could be coordination failures. It could be much deeper. It could be even, the choices we make in either picking winners or not picking winners. It can be anything. But if I asked you, if you were to redesign Nigeria's food system, from farm to table, right? Where would you start and why? And how would you navigate that design?
Great question that I haven't overly pondered on. But the first thing that comes to mind, to be honest, is to one, pick our star indigenous crops.
Okay.
Let's go back to basics. What do we do naturally? What is our competitive advantage, right? What has been local to us? And then let's scale that in a solid way, right? I was speaking to someone recently, someone from the Gates Foundation, and he was giving the example of, India was leading the G20, I think a year or two ago, and they called it the year of millet, right? So they used the chance that all eyes were on India, and everybody came to India, right, for this event. And millet was the center of everything. You go to a restaurant, everything was made with millet. You go wherever, it was just millet, because that was an indigenous crop that was natural to them, and they wanted to show how you could use it in many ways. Let's eat what we produce. And then, so one, I would look at our indigenous things. Secondly, I will be very targeted around all those broken layers I spoke to earlier on, be it infrastructure, financing, bringing it all together into that crop, right? Make sure it scales. And I'm a big believer in industrial zones. When theoretically or in real life, I believe they have the power to address all these things we're speaking of. So have a concentrated space that you say, this is what we're going to do here. We're going to choose whatever, cocoa. Nigeria, we are going to set ourselves a target of where we want to be. And that target will be so bold that Nigeria would be the chocolate center of the world, right? And So that's a food systems
Yeah.
approach, right? But we're
Yeah.
starting with
Yeah.
little
Mm-hmm.
pod, right?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you're doing everything and engineering every step from the science, from the agricultural research institutes who
Mm-hmm.
are designing cocoa that is going to give us yields of 10,
Mm-hmm. 10
10
tons or
tons
something.
per
Yeah. Yeah.
hectare, whatever. And,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 then all the way to the financing, to the
Mm-hmm.
farms, to the farmers, to the inputs, all the way to the infrastructure that's concentrated in that area that
Mm-hmm.
allows so that there's no issue of power, all the way to the storage, to the evacuation, to the science and the financing, to the job creation, making it a center. I will
Exactly.
pick, I will pick maybe five, start with that.
Yeah. I
Five
was going
top.
to ask you, if from what you've seen in the space, if you were to pick three, what would those three be?
Oh no, that's very difficult. There's just too much. And there are many ways to frame that,
Yeah.
many frameworks to sort of answer that. It could be what do we naturally just consume? And we're a
Mm-hmm.
rice consuming place, so let's do rice, right? Or it could be what does the global market want?
Indeed. Yeah.
Right now, fonio is a big thing right now. And I love crops like fonio
Mm-hmm.
because it's a type of millet, as you know, and we
Mm-hmm.
naturally have this across the Sahel region in Africa. So
Absolutely.
Nigeria gets that too. And it's a forgotten crop. It is acha.
Mm-hmm.
People just look, oh, hungry man's food, as it's been called, right? But it hits and ticks so many boxes in terms of what's relevant in our world today. Be it,
Mm-hmm.
it can deal with mass job creation by making sure young people are engaged in the value chain of fonio. It takes the fact that many women farm it, so you're creating livelihoods for women who in turn make sure that their families and their communities are safe and well. It takes huge lead, the issue of nutrition, nine
Mm-hmm.
amino acids. It's a plant protein that's so powerful. It takes the issue of climate, right? It's resilient. You don't have to think about irrigation or whatever. In the most arid regions, in the most drought drought
Prone.
prone areas, it is tolerant, so it can grow.
Yeah.
And guess
Mm-hmm.
what? Right now, it's the rage.
Yeah.
It's rage to an extent globally that people are looking for crops like this that allow them to be gluten-free or that it has these elements that I mentioned
Like,
that are ethically situated. So why don't we key into that? Why don't
mm-hmm.
we key into that and make sure that we're investing in Jos or in Benue State, in the places that are growing fonio, and then
Mm-hmm.
we are adding value. They're using it for alcohol now. They're using it for, you can use it to become the next quinoa of the world. How did how did quinoa suddenly become what it did, right?
Exactly.
So we can do the same. You can truly just make this thing global and we're earning Forex revenue. Even if at the end of the day, we're not eating it locally in the way that you would think because rice has taken over. But let us change the narrative when it
Actually,
comes to our balance of trade.
yeah, that triggers another question. Just yesterday, I was having a chat with a friend of mine who used to be in oil and gas
Mhm,
consult, but over the last 5 years, moved into agriculture.
mhm.
And all he does is aggregate, clean, process, add value, and export
Next question.
hibiscus.
Hibiscus,
Hibiscus.
one of the
Yeah,
biggest. They demand it so much,
it's
but
incredible. I mean, he
it is
showed me his
incredible.
numbers, and yeah, like I'm amazed that such
Yeah,
a business exists in Nigeria, right? But
no, and there are quite a few of them.
yeah, but
Quite a few. Mhm.
the point he made, which I want to put to you, is he said to me, Patrick, if we really want to, if you want to get into the commodities, the agri space, focus more on what you can sell outside Nigeria,
Mhm.
and when you make it, then you can start dealing with the local demand.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good way to think about it versus trying to meet the hunger needs, the poverty in the country? What's your view on that?
I do think it's a two-way street. I do think we need to simultaneously work on both.
Okay.
Um, if you're a business person, he's a business person and he's thinking, look, what's going to bring me money now, right? Let me get that Forex. Let it come in. They're buying it right now. in droves, but less than 20% of what we are sending out as exports in Africa is processed, right? Compared to like 64% of Southeast Asia, for example. So imagine if he adds even more value to that hibiscus he's sending and gains, you get the value of, there's a value uplift of at least 50% or more if you just processed it as opposed to sending raw goods out.
Now, I
So
think it does some processing actually.
yeah, so cleaning, processing, maybe
Yeah,
putting it in little
cleaning in
packs,
Jigawa. Yeah, yeah,
putting
yeah.
it in little packs, branding it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
So that's very important. And I think it's a two-pronged approach, and he's absolutely right. And then figure out how you would deal with the local issues, right? That's the only thing. It's fear, Patrick.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
fear. We have tried. It's not for want of trying.
Mm-hmm.
Many investors, it's not like they don't want to ensure that they're locally doing these things and locally investing across the board. But the people have been bitten. I'm sure you've heard that too. Burnt, not
Yeah,
bitten. The people have
yeah.
been burnt. Even in this hibiscus matter, there are
Mm-hmm.
folks who got containers that were sent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard of these stories that
Yep.
they were not able to offload
Mm-hmm.
because it gets there and the foreign folks say that your moisture content is too high.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot sell this. And yet they
Mm-hmm.
have borrowed money. There are people who have gone, it's crazy. Agriculture has burnt
Yeah.
folks. So there's a lot to it. And I feel that brings another issue that we should not lose sight of in this conversation. It's the education, it's the certifications. Let's do
Quality standards.
the
Yeah.
standards, right? So it's not for doing its sake, whether it's for local market or for the foreign markets. Let us get those standards up to par,
Mm.
right? Have our sun and all of that, but those are across the board for any product, right?
Mm.
But we really need to have a clear focus on agri-food, right?
Mm.
Agricultural
Mm.
products, because it is a gold mine we're sitting on. It is a gold mine if we just put the efforts there. And young people, you say, why wouldn't it scale? Those who are doing some very interesting things that they can take their shea butter abroad or they can take their cashew butter and stuff, they're stuck because they cannot find the funding or government is not providing some subsidized patient capital for them to pay the $20,000 maybe they need to pay Europeans who would
Mm-hmm.
say that you have to certify with this one, that one before it can even come, right? So
Fantastic.
so
Mm-hmm.
so we need to look into that as well. And so you're hearing funding coming up a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to be clear. I'm always relating the funding to something specific. Funding
Mm-hmm.
for infrastructure, funding for certifications, funding for packaging, funding for actual, putting it in a container and getting it out, funding for working capital. It's always tied to something and it really has to make sense for the business.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, you'll find some people who got funding and they went and put it in something that maybe wasn't relevant at the time.
Exactly.
Maybe the pressing
Exactly.
need should have been. So, and that brings you to maybe the work that you do, Patrick. It is advice. People need to know the knowledge. Let's
Yeah.
have more food and agriculture practitioners around who get
Mm.
it and who are not giving false advice, making
Mm.
people so that people end up being burnt.
Mm. Let me, and we're going to get to funding, but let me see if I can understand a bit more about like local sourcing from smallholder farmers or aggregators, etc. Even using Afi's real fruits or any of the other processors. What are some things you've learned from your efforts sourcing from these farmers that could help someone who's thinking of getting into the processing space? What are the big challenges that the farmers have? How have you helped them overcome them? Are there some models that we're seeing evolve on that relationship between the farmer, the processor, some integration models?
Yes, a very critical aspect because if you want to do things at scale,
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria doesn't necessarily give you a lot of contiguous land, right, to do it at scale. So we talk that number of 60% of the world's arable land for Africa and places, but It's not
It's all over
always
the
in the
place.
way, it's all over
Yeah.
the place, one pocket here, there, and then it may have forests on it. You have to then think about, oh my gosh, I have to go and pay money for tractors to come and put these trees down before I can even start farming. So it's a lot. Even when we were in government, we were thinking of land clearing as a
Hmm.
thing to
Hmm.
open up the market for folks. So
Hmm.
so you have a situation like that. But at the end of the day, you're thinking through you have to secure your production, your feedstock, right? So the models you see out there are you want to at least have 30% of what you need, 30 to 40% of what you need. So when you think
Hmm.
about some of the large scale producers today or farmers and companies, many of them, some of them industrial, they do downstream stuff, but they've gone into farming so that they can secure a bit. That's what they sort of look at, right? 30, 40% of their own. They own that land, they own that farm, they own everything, the people farming on it, they're their staff, their own employees. And then the rest you kind of source. You do it from cooperatives or you organize. But that's always a risk. And you find real stories, real hard-learned lessons of you may decide to give an agreement to some farmers and you hear of side selling, which is when they say, okay, when this thing grows in a year's time or in 9 months' time, you're going to give it to me because I need it for my factory. I'm going to pay you. I'll even give you all the money for, oh, yes, thank you very much. Thank you. And then you do that. And when that time comes, you say, where is my produce? Ah, sorry, we sold it to somebody else. They gave me more money for it. And you're
Have you
just
seen any models to deal with that problem?
yeah, so
Uh,
you have models of you see people who try first of all, one is that try and just sort out a bit of your own supply because before
mm,
what people would do is that they would just say, oh, we want to help farmers. Let's just do everything as a cooperative or outsourced
outgrowers. Hmm.
outgrower model as we say. So it's one, it's you limit that, the share of what it is. Some of it is that you really truly pull them in you create you have examples like Babangona, you hear that,
Abankona. Hmm.
a 1 acre fund, which is
Hmm.
where Babangona got its initial model, I believe. 1 acre fund, I chair that board, and it's about let's keep them within a system, right?
Yes.
We'll provide the inputs, we will provide
Inputs,
the training,
training.
we'll
Hmm.
make them see the difference. They should be proud, right? Because they'll see that, wow, if I was part of this group, my yields were 4%, 4 tons per hectare, versus if
Hmm.
I wasn't, the people outside are only getting 1.5. So
Yeah.
so they
Hmm.
want there should be something that wants them to be part of your system. So those are models that work as well. And then there's a sharing, shared success, right?
Peer pressure, all of that.
The peer pressure,
Peer
there's the
accountability.
peer
Hmm.
pressure. There's something in you may know of the folks out in Yola that do milk collection.
Hmm.
Um, um,
L&Z.
not L&Z in Yola in Yola. What's his Aminu Yako, the farm, and they do
Okay.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
milk,
yeah, yeah. Nyako
and
Farms. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
their factory is powered only by solar, and then they have these amazing milk collection models, and they go out, and if the milk in any cooperative or community is even slightly contaminated, they blacklist them and they say, we're not
Mm,
going to buy, and we're not going to buy for the next 3 weeks
mm,
until we sort this out. So that's the peer pressure because
mm,
everybody's not like, who did this, right?
mm.
So that sort of thing.
Fantastic.
And
Fantastic.
so those models really work, I believe.
Mm,
But you find in Africa, some people just decide to just own the whole thing if you can at least to get started, get you to a place that you're comfortable, that the business makes sense,
mm.
and then you move on. It doesn't always have to have an outgrower model, but it's really important with over 10 million or more smallholder farmers. We need to pull them in. We need to
Exactly.
ensure that wealth creation and poverty is reduced.
Hmm.
So for me, those are some of the things. But to your point, and you asked about and what are the challenges around it, it's when you're still working in a situation where there is abject poverty, And you do find that the incentives to stay with a particular model is not always there, right? And
Mm.
farmers want to figure out ways to bypass. But it is possible, it is doable.
Fantastic. So I know you've deployed capital, especially in early stage agri-food ventures. Um, just tapping into your very practical experience, right? What are some of the funding or financing models that have actually worked in that sector?
Yeah. So it's across the value chain. I mentioned Afi, for example. I've done things, and that is actual manufacturing, actual ag production, and all the way. I've done things that are more tech-like, systems, maybe food platform systems that help the restaurant industry, for example. I've done things that are products as well. When the plant-based craze was there, I invested in a company that was doing plant-based foods out in South Africa. So it's across the board, and you continue to think through, and the models differ. I have typically deployed equity. At the time, I was a big believer, and I wasn't seeing a lot. I was a big believer in the power of equity. I felt at the time that a lot of small businesses and some of the listeners here may still be thinking that the only way to raise funding is, oh, the bank, the bank, the bank. And I'm like, the banks are not, as a startup and you're just getting started, you can't be good. Banks are not fit for you. You have to look for the kind of capital that matches what, or the allocator, capital allocator that matches the kind of capital you need and the stage of your business. So don't blame the banks. And when they're saying they need your land or your father's house or your mother's house, don't. They need to cover themselves. And many times they do it over 100% collateral. But figure out other ways, go friends and family, do a crowdsourcing, whatever, make a case and get that early stage funding, and get going first of all. And so that's what, and that was big for me back then and when I first started. And so I was big on giving patient capital. I also believe that I wasn't going to be a shark type investor. Agriculture needs more patient, and SMEs need more patient investments. They need the guidance and the coaching that goes alongside it as well. And so that's the sort of investor that I have been. It's either I'm passive. I think I find a good operator, a good founder that understands their business. I like the space, and I say, take this money and go. I only like seeing the reports, and I have questions from time to time. Otherwise, I turn my face. Or with folks who need a little bit more hand holding, and you want to guide early on to make sure they're on the path, and then after that, you sit back. I don't take any board positions for any sort of influence and stuff. So those work. But if there's anything I believe works, and I just mentioned boards, just start off with the right systems. So
Mm.
even if I'm investing, it's never too early to ensure that you have governance in place. It does not have to be it doesn't have to be a board. It could be an advisory group. Just
Mhm.
have some level of accountability, because Patrick, money has gone out the door for me as well, right?
Exactly.
I have seen entrepreneurs that I thought were amazing, and when they wanted my money, they were like checking in with me. They were and once it's out the door, you're like, "Can I get a report? Knock, knock. What's going on? Oh yeah, yeah, I'm busy. We're busy. We're busy. Can't you see we're building?" Until you get an email telling you that the business has died and they've moved on to the
Exactly.
next, on to the next. So I'm big on processes, policies, governance, and having some level of structure early on. It's never too early. And that discipline sets people up. So I look for that. I look for that, and I look to bring that into what we're doing. And I think that's what works. I think
Mm,
in the VC industry, they are learning. People have learned because they
mm.
have seen money thrown at certain founders, and these folks walked away. Nobody goes to jail. They're like, it's equity now. It's the risk here. You knew it was a risk,
Yeah.
right? And there's no longer any integrity and values. Patrick, again, another conversation I know you and I would enjoy having, but not for today. But that's something I try to look for where
Yeah.
possible. I go with my
Mm.
gut.
Mm.
gut check versus head check, gut
Mhm.
check versus head check. That voice, some people call it faith, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
go with it. And that's really what ends up being, those are the winners I've seen at the end of the day in the portfolio. Yeah.
So, yeah. So let's talk about Nuli Foods. You've successfully expanded into the US. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the business, but more importantly, what were your biggest surprises? So both good and bad
Ooh.
about taking an African food brand global.
Yes. Oh, no, thanks for that question. And thank you. Newly is dear to my heart. It was my own outlet to finally stop just talking the talk, but actually walking, right?
Mm,
Rolling up my sleeves to say, I have for so long been telling people, come invest in Nigeria. Agriculture is the way, food is the way. Let me actually know what it means to build. Let me
mm,
enter those challenges properly myself and see what it is and fix it and go through with it. So becoming an operator has been a game changer in the last 9 years, and we're going to be 10 years next year. And Newly for me was again dealing with that what we talked about at the start of this conversation. I couldn't understand how we were importing so much food, right? I couldn't understand how there was so much waste. So I decided to pick the horticulture space, food and fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, where there was over 60% post-harvest losses and waste, and said that, let's deal with this. It was an easier one that I saw young people, I would always get young people to go in because it wasn't some long lead time for your lettuce to grow or for your red bell peppers to grow. These are high value crops. And at a time when I was also very big on my health and wellness. And so these are big when it comes to nutrition. Let's add our fruits and vegetables into our diet. And so that's why I sort of chose this space. And then finally, I would say I was all about let's start with the market. Let's build the brands. Let's build the demand. Let's start tapping into that $7 trillion food and beverage market globally that knew Africa was nowhere to be found. And so let's build a food brand. And that's how Nuli was born, right?
mm,
We want to truly address issues around malnutrition, and we really want to solve it by sourcing locally. And so we,
mm,
we identified the farms we were sourcing from, challenges there. Challenge, I tried my best to work with young people who were maybe farming. They'll start, and then with time, they won't be able to deliver. So when you're building a business, these are the decisions you have to start making, right? Do I want to continue ticking all the boxes in all the altruistic areas and things that I know are important to change the face of our country and agriculture and rural areas? Or do I just want to first build something that lasts and then
mm,
use that to do the things that I need to do once you've built it?
mm,
And that's where I landed, so we still do where we can sourcing directly, but we do a lot of sourcing from aggregators as well,
mm.
from the middle or the buyers. And
Biggest
that's
surprise?
so the biggest surprise as we think about moving into the US, because it was always a big thing for us, people ask that question, even to enter the US, it was always the big plan. And we wanted to bring an indigenous brand global and not say no to the Pizza Huts and the KFCs that were coming in. He said, why are you spending all that money on a franchise fee to own KFC here when we have our own brands here? We should be taking the Booker Huts abroad. We should be taking the Chicken Republics abroad. Let them walk in the way South Africa's did with Nando's. And that's what we're
Mhm,
doing with Nuli. So
mhm,
biggest surprise maybe was, just thinking through how we repositioned to tell the story for the US market. It's still very much Nuli. You go there, it is Nuli. You get your Nuli Zobo drink, you get all your Nuli wraps, your Nuli food. But you have to tell the story to match the consumer and being very humble about that. So
yeah.
you need so I think for me, it was even just learning some of those things and making sure that we were feeding it very quickly into the business model, even as we launched, right?
And
Fail
mhm.
forward. And then what was the other thing you said?
No. So that's the big surprise, good or bad. But just to tag on the back of that, did you have to? I'm sorry, I haven't visited, but I will.
Oh,
But
when you
did
come.
you Did you have to tweak the flavors, etc., to meet the palate of this new market, or are you just presenting Nigerian food, African food as
Yeah.
authentic as we appreciate it in Africa?
Great word, authentic. The foundation for me was bringing my menu and creating recipes that were authentic.
Mm,
So even as we were bringing our Africa Magic Bowls is what we call it, that has our jollof rice, that has a salad as part of it, some plantain, and then a pepper sauce. And you can have whatever protein you want, be it boiled egg or chicken or shrimp or whatever. When I was making that over the summer before we opened, and I was doing the recipe of the jollof, and every day I'll cook it, I'll take it home to my mom. She was with me in the States at the time. I'll say, how does this taste? Dad, the spice is plenty. Oh. Are you sure Oyinbo can eat this one? Well, I'll take it. Then I realized she wasn't in one breath, she was my market for, okay, mommy, is this smoky jollof? As in, will you chop this food,
yeah.
Because it was important to make sure the
Mm,
core Nigerians, Africans said that, yes, this
this is
is
our
good
own. Mm,
jollof, right?
yeah.
Or this is good fried rice, patty fried rice. It was
Mhm.
so important to me. But at the same time, I would take that same rice and give it to the Oyinbo person who doesn't like spice. This particular person, he says, Ada, I run away from spice, the tiniest things. And I'll say, can you eat this? And oh,
Mhm.
and if the person turns red, I'll say, I still need to take it down a notch. I still need to take it
Yeah.
down a notch. And I'll just finalize by saying that even today, that our bestseller continues to be jollof rice. Every day I'm seeing orders, now catering orders, offices. Can we get trays? Can we get this? Jollof is
Mm,
still our bestseller, the bowl.
mm,
But when I get those odd comments of saying it was a bit spicy, I say
mm.
no. I'm not reducing it because it will no longer be what is authentic to us. So I
Exactly.
hope that answers you that I was
No, it does.
very
It
clear how we designed it, that we presented our food in the way Americans were used to in fast casual, a wrap, a bowl, a smoothie, but our smoothie has moringa. Somebody put on our page recently that, oh my gosh, a honey mustard dressing with baobab. That's interesting. That's what Nuli does. We're infusing our indigenous foods. They get fonio jollof. We're
yeah.
sourcing the fonio here, shipping it, right?
Mm.
And you're making it a fonio jollof. And suddenly they're like, what is this? It's amazing. So yes, that's very exciting.
No,
That one,
fantastic.
like you said, very quickly, just on the point of a big surprise, right?
Mhm.
The first one I said was, you could take it however, but can I
Mhm.
say a big shock?
Yeah.
Was the labor issues. Hey God. It is, I'll be here saying, hey, we have problems. Nigerian youth, they don't want to work. Blah, blah, blah. It is the same. It is the
Exactly.
same over there. And so don't get it twisted. Don't let people
Exactly.
let you think that, in fact, I now thank God for the training and the kind of stuff I have in my 6 stores here, right?
Mhm.
Because be it Gen Z issues, however, I'm sorry, I'm sure there might be Gen
No,
Zs
no,
on
no.
this,
It is what
but
it
it's
is.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
we're facing a fundamental problem. People don't
Yeah.
want to work. They
Mhm.
want to sit down and become the next Zuckerbergs and stuff. Everybody is bringing out an app, and we are fueling this.
Yes.
Development world is fueling it. We're doing pitch competitions. This that making people think that I'm sorry. We have to draw a line soon. Not
Mm.
everybody should be an entrepreneur. No, go and get a 9 to 5. Get the discipline it means to
Mm.
build and
Mm.
understand what it takes to build businesses that last and to operate if you want to become an
Well,
entrepreneur.
you may be whistling into the wind because the problem is everyone feels that once they've got a phone in their hands and some ring lights, they can become content creators and make a lot of money. So it's gonna be a hard one. But
In food, you still have to chop. Oh. AI is not going to feed you. Unless AI is
yeah,
going to start, maybe AI will feed you. But at the
maybe,
end of the
maybe.
day,
So we've got a question from William Dennis from Liberia, and his question is, how can entrepreneurs improve access to regional and global markets? But I think the bigger question is, how can African food brands build trust and recognition at scale?
great one. The first part, I immediately thought of the Africa Continental Free Trade agreement, and I just feel like things are not moving fast enough to support entrepreneurs. We go around lots of policymakers meetings everywhere in the world, but the practicalities of it is not opening up. We should have free movement of our products easily. We should know who to be, which we should know what logistic partners we should click on something and on a website and know who will send your things, who will move it from here to Ghana or to Senegal, and you know where it's going. You know the certifications you need. You should know all of that. So that's another issue. But I think you start with building a brand that people want, and the Nuli example is there, right? I'm very big right now, Patrick. I'm putting some food products from chin-chins from people, young people. Nuli has always been known to create the platforms for other SMEs food SMEs to have exposure. We did it locally, and now we're doing it internationally. So let's use our platforms and support each other to bring to light all the other businesses. You don't have to be building alone. Collaboratively expose others and let them have that access. I go for trade shows, the Food Systems Summit in Dakar. I met people. I went around. I saw somebody who was doing chocolates in Ghana, and I said, I want to start selling this in Nuli in America. This is an amazing product. It was branded nicely. They had their certifications. Say, okay, FDA, you need to get that approval. Okay, you go on their website, you do this, you do that, and then that's how you access. So that for me, but you start with building something that people definitely would want. Always focus on your quality. And when you're talking about food, it's so important. Your quality, your branding, and I'll land on this point on branding, Patrick. When we got into our store, we're in a food hall where we are, and people just thought we would just use the plain brown craft carrier bags, and the paper for our wrap would just be okay, clear white paper and we launched off with branded nice Nuli paper for the wraps, branded orange bags. Everything was like boom, 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 and they're like, huh? And by the time they don't know we're an African brand, they just think we're just an American brand that says it's doing African inspired food. So they love hearing that story that what you have 6 stores in Nigeria. So we're using it to be ambassadors for Nigeria and for Africa. Let's change the game. Let's stop. Let us. And my big plan was that we will stop accepting mediocrity. People would see that Africa can bring excellence,
We
right?
must
I
demand
want
it.
to
Yep.
push, yes, we must demand it. So I want to push you. I used to give presentations. I remember once I would show a picture of a coconut oil that was bought in Trader Joe's, a supermarket in America. And I'll show a coconut oil that a young entrepreneur did maybe in IITA or something. And I'll say, which one would you buy? And I won't tell them where it was. And everybody, of course, will go to the Trader Joe's American one. Coconut oil that is maybe coming from us or
Badagry.
so. And just because they took their time to print a nice design and put it in the right container and not just slap on some funny thing where even the writing is
The
not there.
printing. Yep.
The printing is even bad. So please, those are things that we need to
Fantastic.
change.
Fantastic. I have a question from Emmanuel Baba Aduku.
Mm,
Um, he says, one of the common challenges facing Nigerian firms is acquiring process knowledge, so they know how to do things, and
mm.
also knowledge management to enable them autonomously produce value with little or no reliance on foreign technologies or processes. His question is, how is Nuli Foods approaching this as a Nigerian firm and stakeholder in Nigeria's industrialization?
No, it's a great question. I think whatever the case, where you're the person who is asking that question, where you're getting at in my mind is that we do need knowledge, right? And sometimes the knowledge isn't local, sometimes, right? Or at the standards you want or where you want to be, you go and pick a role model company or whatever for somewhere else, and you bring that knowledge in. But I think where they're getting at is that it should not be for life, right? it
Yes.
should phase out. So that should be passed on and should be inbuilt into the companies. Absolutely. Absolutely. I still remember when I was in government and we were working with the company, a large company, global company in ag, and we said, we'll give you tariffs, we'll give you tax rebates. You don't have to pay tax holidays if you bring investments in to come and set up your large cassava processing facility. We'll do this, we'll do that. And they said, you know what, we don't need that. We're happy to pay your taxes. And we were like, okay, isn't that what they tell you that investments always, when you want to attract investments, that's what they usually want? They said, no, but you know what you can give us? You can give us training subsidies.
Mm,
Allow us to bring our expatriates for a few years, maybe 2 years max, so that we can fund them, right? But then um, we want them to go back, but we want a clear path. And if you give us a subsidy for that or some sort of funding, patient capital, so that we can pass that knowledge on, have a center of excellence, and we can hire locally and we know that they are at the standards. Patrick, you know that Nigeria started there. You know, when you look back of where we used to be, our biggest companies and that the British came and they,
mhm, mhm,
the knowledge was kept here and then it's
mhm,
now phased out. So it's possible, but we have to
mhm,
be very intentional about it.
mhm, mhm. Fantastic. There's another question from Uchechukwu Okoro.
That's my namesake. Oh, you know, I'm Uche as well, Uche
I
Chukwu.
didn't know that. Okay, so one challenge with agribusiness entrepreneurs is the need for working capital.
Mhm.
How have you, as a financier funder, navigated this challenge? What financing mechanisms or support do you provide to entrepreneurs or investees? In other words, are there specific funds that provide revolvers, financing support for working capital needs?
Yes, yes. No, it's one of the biggest issues. And even if you do get the working capital, you have issues like it's, high cost of capital. So the interest rate will be so punitive that it makes it so difficult. Sometimes the amounts you require is not what you get. So at the end of the day, it's still perpetuating the problem if you don't get what you want. So I've had to depend on development funding, not development funding, but patient capital. I'm a big
Mm,
believer, Patrick, at the end of the day, I mentioned earlier, it may not be the banks, but there's money out there from private philanthropies. There's money out there from foundations and all, and I believe they are more aligned with the goals of agribusiness entrepreneurs, right? That need more patient money and not the cutthroat sort of high interest rates and collateral requirements and all of that. So I have worked as an advisor to a number of these entities, be it ADB or Gates Foundation or whoever, to figure out how do they design structures to use their own patient philanthropic capital, because it's not the bank's money that's going to do it. It's not shareholders' funds that's going to do that. Yes, at the end of the day, they are accountable for a return on equity to their shareholders. So it's not a charity, but use these entities and this sort of capital to do things like work to unlock working capital. And a number of them are doing it. I think Faith Foundation is doing a real good job. Check them out. They work with entrepreneurs. They give loans or repayable grants. I'm on the board of Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. It's something we do as well, and we're moving more to this sort of patient repayable grants that you put the discipline into an entrepreneur that they have to pay back, and they start building their financial muscle so that at some point they can graduate to a bank, but at the same time it's patient enough and it's not requiring interest rates, it's not requiring because it's a grant. So those are the sorts of things that found work at the end of the day.
mm,
And that's
mm,
sort of how I have sort of addressed things here and there. During COVID, I got SMEs, was able to channel user advocacy to get SMEs funding from the central bank at the time to support SMEs And that was we got it as well for Nuli, and that was very, very good. You have banks like GTB and some that at some point they used to have it. I believe they stopped now, and then
Mhm.
the question is there, where you could just get 10 million naira or so, up to 10 million naira without even talking to anybody and without any collateral. So we know it's needed, but the reason why maybe a GTB has stopped is maybe it was abused, or they just realized it wasn't making, people were not repaying and it wasn't making the money. And that's why you need the likes of the faith foundations, the philanthropic capital to do more of that. And it's good to see that that's coming into play. And
Sure.
it's my goal to keep supporting that as well.
And I think GT has done well for food in Nigeria. I mean, the food fair
Yeah,
has also
alone.
created a
Yeah,
number of, celebrities and so on, so they deserve the shout out. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I have a question from Roslyn Anyokoro, who's with us in next year. Her question is, when it comes to the spice market in Nigeria, have
Mhm.
you personally found it challenging to source the ingredients you need? Do you rely mostly on local producers or do you also source internationally? So that's the first part of her question. Now, the second part is looking ahead, if you stepped into a Nigerian kitchen 10 years from now, 2035, what emerging or future food products do you imagine could become a common staple in the
Hmm.
kitchen?
Oh, what a lovely question. On what was the first one again? The first one
The-
was
yeah, do you source
do
locally
I
or
source locally?
yeah,
Oh, absolutely. So we buy all our spices for Nuli. We buy from Ace Foods. That's the one that's
that's
owned by
indeed. Yeah.
Mezzo and Ndidi,
Yes.
Sahel. So since we started Nuli, like literally since we started Nuli nearly 9 years ago, we've been sourcing only from Ace Foods. I
Mm.
love their spices. I love their curry powder, their ginger. Now we source yaji, and I'm getting it from a young lady in Abuja. So that's the yaji spice, the suya spice. I am
Yeah.
focused only locally. Look, Nuli is only locally sourced, and I didn't overly talk about the ethos of Nuli, but no import policy of Nuli, and that took us through COVID and the disruptions in the market. We've always been very particular about everything we source. Even our strawberries are from Jos. Our coffee, in our coffee espresso machine, we get the beans from the Mambila, from Jos as well, from the Mambila Plateau. So it is grown, Nigerian grown coffee. So
And
so
teas
so
too. They've got very good teas up there in
they've
the
got
Mambila
teas
Plateau.
as well, exactly. Honey, we've sourced, so it's very intentional. And now we're actually still using Ace spices in America, right? It's only
Mhm.
one store right now, so we're able to deal with that. But the team is working, and we're working with some big what do they call them? The food suppliers on the US
Yes.
side, bring in bulk produce from the continent to bring that in for us. But it's a game changer. Why should I be buying ginger when our own ginger here, just the smell, like literally in America, people walk into our dry storage shelf area and they're like, oh my gosh, the spices, right? Just it's so pure, it's so good.
Yeah.
And then the second question was around 10 years down the line,
Yeah.
what
What
would
would
I
be
what would
what
be?
could be a staple in our kitchens that you're seeing emerge today?
Oh,
Are we still going to be with I mean, we've got a massive repertoire of, cuisines, but is there something else you're beginning to
hmm.
see that could play a more dominant role, maybe 20, 30 years from now?
I can't really think about it now, but I'd really like us to switch away from imported wheats and stuff like that and use our own natural flours, right?
Mm,
Whatever. And then you have a lot of young entrepreneurs going into that, be it even fonio flour and all of that. Let's just use what we have indigenously, and that will make me really happy. Where we
mm,
are truly embracing our
mm,
own, and that
mm,
becomes the norm for our children as well, right? In a
mm.
big way, yes.
No, but I think even for you, I think, with the more I think Nigerians are going to become more health conscious.
Hmm.
And I think that some of the bleached rice and so on,
Hmm.
we may see a drop off of
Hmm.
those and consume more of the more nutritious, grains and so on. I think uh, in some homes, you're beginning to see that move. The challenge could be availability or access
Hmm.
to them. But
Yeah.
I think folks like you can make them more available, and we could see a shift from rice and some of those
But
to
it's that policy, told you what
mm,
India did at the top of putting the indigenous thing. Millet is what we are going to use, right? So
yeah,
imagine a government just being, we tried it when we were in government, with cassava. We were using cassava flour for bread. We were talking about
yeah.
cassava. So it really has to be a two-pronged approach, but in many ways, the government has a big role to play in driving that national
Mm,
agenda.
yeah. And I have a question from Dakina Cooper, who's with us in next year, Liberia. His question is, what unique challenges and strategies for bridging the cultural and regulatory gaps, in addition to just general business practices in accessing the US market?
Oh,
So there's a lot of interest in accessing the big US markets. What are some of
great,
the regulatory cultural gaps that we
great.
should pay attention to?
Yes, great question. I actually did not have too much stress with regulations upon it's all there. The beauty about it is that just Google and go DC Trade, DC Food Department, or DC whatever, and they just list out your checklist, right? Do it and you're fine.
Mm,
So we had to, so all the registrations, getting the company registered, you can do that. Let me know if you need help, but it's just easy as well. We didn't even, didn't even have to use any lawyer. Don't go and pay anybody. You literally can go online and register a company in DC, and you can pay $100 extra and get it. I got it like in 5 minutes. The company, it was
mm,
registered, right?
mm.
So and then with that you then apply for your tax number. So it's the entity that you apply, and then from there it just opens up. Once you have those things, business license. But before that, I needed a food permit. So food permit, you get them to come. Would I say it was a big challenge? No, we had everything in place. We used the checklist. Okay, make sure that temperature thermometers are inside all the fridges, things like that. Sinks, wash hand, put the posters up of what it means. It's just the right thing to do. It's things
Yeah.
that we bypass here easily. So I actually loved and I welcome the fact that I was learning stuff that I could apply back at home. That, oh, this
Mhm.
makes sense from a regulation standpoint. Um, and then we failed our first food our license test because he wanted an extra sink somewhere. He says people working here would need to turn and wash their hands, so put a sink. And so would I so so maybe a big challenge I would throw there. And one of the things apart from labor that I saw when it comes to regulations is workmanship. And this is a problem across the board in the world we're moving into, Patrick, in a world
Mm.
where it's all AI and tech. Nobody wants to be a carpenter again. Nobody wants to be a plumber again. So the sink that they said we should put cost me maybe $100. Okay, go on Amazon, buy a sink, put it. To fix the sink,
Exactly.
to get the person to just come, the days it took to get someone to come and say, okay, we're going to they'll do a call out first. Oh, yeah, yeah, maybe we'll do this. That call out itself, you have to pay. And then to do, it's like 4 times the cost of the sink you bought just to
Exactly.
connect. Here, I just call Mr. Sunday. My sink.
Musubao. Hmm.
So, so no, the regulations, please just focus on the information is there. That's the beauty. Unlike Nigeria, sometimes or in other countries here, it's complex and it's not organized. It's very organized over there.
You know exactly
Everything,
what to do, do
you know
it.
exactly what to do. Just do it. You don't need some side consultants. You really
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Just get it done and you should be good.
Fantastic. I have another question from Alvari Tafa. Would you
Mhm.
agree with the notion that we have to be deliberately intentional in standardization of farming skills? So like the skills, the pre and post harvest inputs, that for us to progress as a country, there needs to be a deliberate effort to standardize, many of these things we do on the farm. Would that help address some of the challenges we're facing?
If it means by standardization, you're talking about just skills, right? Just having a certain level of skills to be on the farm and to drive it. The answer is yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It's across different value chains. It's across crops. It's across livestock. It's very different, right? Livestock, crops, fisheries, all of that. It's different. But if we start getting graduates coming out of our agriculture universities and technical institutes, if we start having training programs that are really focused on ensuring that we have focused minimum standard level of sort of technical capacity, whichever value chain you're going into or space. Absolutely. And again, that maybe comes from some level of government policy directive coupled with funding, right? To those institutions, to those universities. And then you want to make sure at the end of the day, they get paid. You've not talked about that, right? You want to make it attractive. You want to make it an area that people say, this, I can build a career here. You want to change the narrative and make it cool, right? So that everybody is not rushing to be a tech boss, right? So, so yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
let me do a double barrel question here. So the first part of the double barrel is if we could do just, and I know this is a difficult, yeah, okay, if we could do just one policy reform, right, that
Difficult
would
one.
have an immediate and, transformational impact in the agro space, what could that reform be? And I know agro is all interrelated and so on, but if there was just one thing that could unlock, the sector, and I don't know if there is, but if there is, what is it? Yeah. Then on the back of that, I know you're big on, women-led businesses, etc. What's that thing we need to unlock for women-led businesses, agribusinesses to be able to grow at scale?
Yeah. So the first question, thank you. Like you said, it is complicated, but the one thing I can just think of is just if imagine just the way government wakes up today and says, from a policy perspective, no more imports of rice, right? Or no more imports of wheat. So all
Yeah.
that bread you've been chopping from ShopRite, all that bread, no more.
Yes.
Now you better figure it out how you're going to, So imagine what we'll save from
Mhm.
from a balance sheet standpoint and from a trade balance perspective. And however we want to, if you still want to keep eating bread, figure out how you're going to make it. Are you going to use sweet potato that we're growing and make sweet potato flour? Are you going to use cassava flour to make the bread? Figure it out, right? Or you just don't eat bread, but we've sorted that out, right? And reduced our import bill, right? So I think something around import and sticking with it, not the somersault, sticking with it.
Mhm.
Um, and then and that's just one. I can think of a few others, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not to be one.
Mhm.
Second is
Women,
on the
women-led businesses.
women-led.
Yeah.
Women, the women in the agribusiness sector are 2 times less likely to get funding than men. The data is out there. It's something I'm passionate about. I've done work around it. We really have to be focused on funding, unlocking financing for women. So even when we talk these big numbers of the need for financing in ag and in processing, it's mixed, right? It's both genders, but women are disproportionately left out.
Mm.
It's a fact. The data is there. So if we do that and if we're targeted around making sure the right funding comes to women for their working capital, for their certifications, they've already spent the money doing nice products and they need to get access to export markets, help them do that. Let that funding support branding. Let that funding support them being able to upgrade, to acquire equipment for their facilities. Let that funding give women money and you will
Mm.
see the returns. You will see the returns. The numbers are there as well of women returning more from a financial standpoint for
Maybe we use maybe I use the next, last few minutes of our chat to look at some of your personal journey, so what experiences most shaped your conviction that number one, Africa, Africa's future can be bright? Yeah. And then number two, to focus your journey on the food systems.
Mm. No, Patrick, I know I'm a Pan-Africanist at heart, you know. People like Aruma Ote, who got me into the African Development Bank very early in my
Who
career.
was my guest a few months ago?
She's amazing. You know, and I would always be she remains so dear to me. She came for the Nuli launch, by the way. She was part of that in DC.
Mhm.
Um, you know, being in institutions like that, it's an eye opener. I was a 24-year-old suddenly having conversations with Ethiopian prime ministers or with Gambian, but you're just like, so you're just seeing, oh my gosh, look at the amazing what we have. We have so much. And I just really knew that I was dedicating the rest of my life to to the things we were going to do here. When I went to business school in the US afterwards, everybody knew me. They knew I wasn't trying to get into McKinsey in Dallas or any company there. They were like, Ada is our next
We are
finance.
heading home.
Yeah, is the next finance minister of Nigeria. They used to say that as well, you know? And then I didn't even know I was going to do government. It was down the line that I got the opportunity to go and be. So, where was I in my thought process now?
No, just about your
So
living
those,
in.
those things built my conviction. I just see
Mhm.
it. I got tired of hearing potential, potential. I was like, let's do it. Let's
Mhm.
do it. It's possible. It's like this can't be rocket science. And then you do it, and then the challenges, of me building and the government demolishing our first store in Lagos and me having to start all over, or not knowing after COVID. I thought Nuli was going to close. I need to talk about that more. I don't talk about it, but it was a turning point. The number of
Mhm.
restaurants and businesses that closed or changed or just closed, went out of business. COVID was bad. Let's not
Yeah,
forget it was only five
for
years
all of
ago.
us, for all
For all
businesses.
of
Yeah.
us. So the fact that we got through that,
Yeah.
to me, I'm saying it's a sign God really wants me to do what I'm doing. And to think 5 years down the line, we now have a store in the US and we are flying, right?
Mm.
So that is the conviction that there is something, and God has brought me this far and my team, and we see where we can take the narrative of Africa and the narrative of Nigeria and food on a
Yeah.
global map. We see it. There's a clear line. Uh,
Mm.
and that I want to see in my lifetime by God's grace to see it
Amen.
come to
Mhm.
light. And
Amen.
that's what keeps me going. That's the fire that keeps that conviction that keeps it burning.
Maybe in 1 minute, what advice would you give a young African entrepreneur who wants to make a dent in the food systems, either locally or in the global market? What's that thing you say to that young entrepreneur?
I say, first of all, have crystal clarity on where you want to go, because there will be challenges along the way, big ones. Um, but it's that clarity and that conviction of where you want to be and how you're going to achieve it that's going to keep you going despite
Mm.
the challenges. So, and it will keep you going because it will help you find the solutions, even in the most trying times. And it will make sure that you will find the helpers that will find you, the helpers that will find you too as well,
Mm.
to get you through
Mm.
those trying times. But
Mm.
the foundation is to have that clarity and belief in yourself and in where you're going and where you want to go to with that business, and everything else will take care of itself. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Ada, this has been a very powerful conversation. Thank you so much. Mhm.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much for pushing on excellent questions. I just feel like how did the time just go by,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's never enough time,
It's never
But
enough.
I mean, for our participants, ladies and gentlemen, Africa's food challenges just not a lack of potential. It's more like a lack of coordination, investment, and imagination. We have the land, we have the talent, we have the markets, we have the climate. What we need are the connective tissues, so that missing middle, that processing capacity, infrastructure, smart financing, but like Ada said, the enabling policy. We believe that entrepreneurs like Ada show what is possible, linking smallholders to markets, reducing post-harvest losses, building global brands, that will compete and become franchises, across the world. The next decade can be transformative for Africa's food systems. If we can scale these models, invest boldly, and empower those at the heart of our agriculture, we can win. And so on that, I thank you for listening to Development Discourse, big ideas, important questions, real conversations. Until next time, I'm Patrick Okigbo. Let's keep building that society we want to live in. Ada, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks a lot.